All right, here we go, coming off of mute. Can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Tanium session, ready for the next generation of work, building the right foundation. My name is Ryan Doon, and I'm a Director, Technical Solutions Engineer at Tanium. A little bit about myself is that from an academic perspective, I'm an electrical engineer. I've worked at various companies like Deloitte, IBM, and more recently, Microsoft before coming to Tanium. And now I will ask Eric to introduce himself as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Eric Arnst. I am a technical solutions engineer with Tanium as well. Been with the company about 3.5 years. I was actually a customer of Tanium for about 1.5 years before that as well. Thanks, Ryan.
Perfect. Feel free to drop any questions into the chat, and I will also place our emails in there, and feel free to contact us directly if you have any questions outside of the session. So just so you know, as we present, feel free to ask any questions, and we will be answering your questions. All right. So what we'll do is we'll go through our first few slides just to give you an introduction to our session and the Tanium platform, and then Eric will be giving you a live demonstration and having a discussion with you guys as well too. So IT complexity is at an all-time high, and data and organization silos are still prevalent in most companies. 55% of organizations use more than 20 tools across IT. This tool sprawl means lack of visibility and control. Further, 40% of CIOs agree that these silos make it difficult to identify the severity of issues and drive business impact. And almost 9 out of 10 IT leaders say data silos create business challenges that stall digital transformation initiatives. Such initiatives include modernizing legacy systems, migrating apps to the cloud, and automating business processes. This disconnected data and limited visibility prevent leaders from making great decisions quickly. How do you have confidence in your decisions if you don't have confidence in your data? How do you prevent a breach from becoming the next news headline if you can't rapidly respond? And the answer to that is you can't. And that's why so many organizations in the midst of transformation are consolidating on a single platform. You can't drive great decisions that match the speed of digital and cloud when you're surrounded in legacy point of solutions and incomplete, inaccurate data. A platform brings teams together. It eliminates visibility and accountability gaps. It reduces the time and effort to complete tasks and respond to incidents. And businesses can dramatically reduce the time and effort to support infrastructure that was never planned to play well with each other. And that is the beauty of the platform and precisely why Tanium exists today. Offering businesses of all sizes real-time visibility, complete control, and rapid response across critical workflows without having to add unnecessary infrastructure and additional agents. At Tanium, our vision is to manage and secure anything with a chip. Before we dive deeper into how Tanium solves the most pressing issues for IT leaders today, let me just share a few more details about who we are and why we exist. Tanium was founded in 2007 by a father and son duo who sold BigFix to IBM. We recently moved our headquarters from Emeryville to Kirkland, Washington, and today we have a team of more than 1,700 strong. Tanium has a valuation north of $9 billion, with top-tier investors such as Anderson Horowitz, TPG, Salesforce, and Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. We proudly serve over 500 customers from 1 million plus to 1,000 endpoints. We proudly serve 50% of the Fortune 100 and many more customers from around the globe. At Tanium, we're only as strong as our partner ecosystem. From major disruptors such as Salesforce and Google to world-class resellers and service providers such as PwC, Verizon, CDW, and WWT, just to name a few. The Tanium Endpoint platform empowers IT organizations with the most comprehensive set of endpoint data to confidently make decisions and take action regardless of where those endpoints exist, whether that be remote, in the cloud, on-premise, or across any endpoints that can be managed. Simply put, it's real-time visibility. The data you need now, and complete control. The ability to pivot and remediate a multitude of issues, vulnerabilities, and misconfigurations. And finally, rapid response. When breaches occur, and they always will, Tanium gives you the ability to quickly scope incidents and minimize their impact. Tanium's architecture, and let me just go back a little bit. Yeah. Tanium's architecture optimizes data collection and analysis depending on device type and location to ensure the completeness and reliability of data without slowing down networks or device performance. This is truly what sets Tanium apart. And when Eric gives the demonstration of the platform, you'll see this concept of real-time visibility and control and exactly what a platform means from the Tanium perspective. And lastly, as part of the Tanium platform, we're building an ecosystem of integrated solutions. Ultimately, our ecosystem helps reduce the cluttered endpoint security and operations management suite by making it easy to integrate with solutions you already use and enriching them with real-time endpoint data. A good example is that, for example, many customers who are Tanium customers end up being, Splunk customers or ServiceNow customers, and they'll use Tanium to enrich their ServiceNow CMDB, or use Tanium to gather information across their enterprise to enrich their SIM or an endpoint like Splunk, for example. So with having the ability to pull this real-time data, you can reduce your risk through better information to help improve decision-making and action planning. So now I will hand it over to Eric, who will take you through the platform. And as mentioned before, as Eric presents, feel free to ask any questions. I'll be monitoring the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Let me get my screen shared out here. Talk really overall platform, and making this not even Tanium specific necessarily, but just the future of business, the future of IT. As the title of this presentation suggests, is really what Tanium is hoping to solve for. Because what we find is that organizations have all sorts of tools. They have tools to do just about everything from patching to compliance checking, integrity monitoring, all of these things that ultimately just end up adding to the complexity of your IT landscape. There's just so many different things that your teams need to be managing. There's different support models, there's different cost structures, and really the strategy that we see happening throughout IT. You see what ServiceNow has done with workflow. You see what Splunk is doing with data. Everyone's moving towards a platform, and yet the endpoint space is still very cluttered. It's still very much the wild, wild west. And so what Tanium looks to do with organizations then is to help reduce that complexity by way of just consolidating tools, right? All of these squares you're seeing on my screen here are representative of what we call modules, but they're just workflows. And these workflows otherwise are probably being done in your organization already by point solutions. And they each have their own infrastructure. They each have their own support models, et cetera, as I mentioned. And so this strategy, as you go towards something like Tanium, is to consolidate. It's to not have as many tools in the environment. And in many ways, we can break down the silos between teams because we're the only platform that's doing both operations and security use cases. So throughout this demonstration today, I hope to leave you with really two things. One is that platform approach. Tanium is very much a platform that's doing both operations and security use cases. But the other thing is where I'll start clicking the buttons here. And this is where this gets very interesting because we can go get real-time data from all of the endpoints in your environment, no matter if it's 500 endpoints or 1,000 or literally up to 1 million on very minimal infrastructure. As Ryan said up front, I strongly encourage you to ask questions as we go through this. I do believe it's webinar style, so it'll have to be in the chat. But Ryan will be answering those questions. As I mentioned in my introduction, I was a customer of Tanium, and so I have seen this demonstration from your chair. I remember being a bit skeptical and having a lot of questions of like, can you do this and can you do that? Please ask those questions, and we'll also get to them at the end as well for some Q&A. So as I mentioned, let me start showing you what this looks like to go get real-time information from all of your endpoints, just using natural language queries where I could just say something like, I want to go get the computer name and maybe the IP address, the operating system. Again, we're just kind of stringing these things together of what we want to go get from every endpoint in the environment. And this is about just visibility. This is about being able to go get this type of information from everything. And because we're doing it in real time, that means that we know for sure that this is reliable information. And if you compare that with what other tools are doing, they're pulling it out of a database, right? And just to emphasize the point, this data is not coming from a database. It's not coming from any pre-cached source of data. It's literally coming off those endpoints right now, which is why I started putting client time in there. You can see they're all 11 minutes past the hour, right? There's no way that's coming from a database. And yet we're already back from 100% of machines, which amounts to 1,053 total systems in our demo environment. But again, this is every bit as fast in 1,000 endpoints environments as it would be in 1,000,000 endpoints. In fact, it's faster as we add more, which seems counterintuitive, but I'll explain how that's even possible. And Jim, I see a question in the chat there. Does this overlap with Manage Engines Desktop Central? Absolutely, that's a component of what we do. Right? Like I said, we have a lot of other functionality around other things, to include this real-time nature of getting answers from endpoints. But certainly their ability to push software is something that we do as well. We'll cover that in a little bit as we go through this. And just know that this is highly extensible. Anything you could possibly want to know about the endpoint, we can go ask. So let's do something that's a little more dynamic. Maybe installed applications, right? What if we wanted to get a list of all the installed applications from all of our machines? This time, let's do it just from the machines with a Windows operating system, though. So again, I'm just going to type in what I want to go get from all of the machines in the environment. And this time it's going to say, are you a Windows operating system? If yes, what all do you have installed? And we'll watch how quickly these answers come back from all of the machines. But essentially, this is like you were asking a single machine. Maybe you're looking at the add remove programs on a single machine, but being able to do that synchronously across all of the machines in the environment. And then you see here how we're pulling back an aggregate count of how many machines have those particular pieces of software. And the really amazing thing here is it's not just about finding the information that quickly, which we're already back from 100% of those machines and got those answers back. And we see here, there's Dropbox on 17 machines. So this one always catches my eye because when I was a customer, Dropbox was not allowed in our corporate environment. That makes it very easy for somebody to exfiltrate data. And so we could then select that one and deploy an action and just tell Tanium to uninstall that MSI. And as quickly as what we found that data, which was all of about 20 seconds, those machines will start uninstalling Dropbox. And then we could even take that a step further. We could say, hey, let's make this a recurring thing. Maybe every hour, go out there and ask all the machines, do you have Dropbox installed? If yes, then run this little uninstall script. And so in that way, we've automated away that task. You don't have to think about that one anymore. And what this really boils down to is that we're able to then find machines in an undesirable state. This is just basic IT hygiene, being able to standardize on something. So go find the machines in an undesirable state in real time at massive scale, and then be able to take action on that in an automated way that really gets you towards that IT hygiene that everyone tries to achieve, but it's very difficult when you start to get more and more machines. Really, anything over about 1,000 becomes very unwieldy, and that's where Tanium comes into play. So I would normally break for questions here, and I'm sure that this is something that you got the wheels turning a little bit. I know it did for me when I was watching this and just thinking of how all I could use that real-time capability. But again, if you have any questions, please throw them into chat or into the Q&A box, and we'll take a look at those. And Ryan can kick over any questions to me as we go. But I will say, it's that power and that capability to go get real-time information from all of the endpoints that drives our ability to do all of these things in a way that typically is better and faster and more reliable than systems that were purpose built to do whatever it is that they were set to do. So like Jim, to your question about can Tanium Or does Tanium overlap with Manage Engine? Or I guess better, we could also say that as, can Tanium replace Desktop Central? Absolutely, we can. And again, it's just in a couple of our modules, like Patch and Deploy, are really what Desktop Central does. But meanwhile, we do all of these other things as well on a single console and on a single agent. And that's very lightweight at the endpoint. And so what I want to do here is just really show you how this is possible. Like I said, I watched this demo as a customer, and I have a background in network engineering. So when I was seeing that real-time question asking and those answers coming back, I thought one of two things. I thought either that's not real, right? Like, it works in your demo environment. Does it work in real life though? Or maybe you're crushing the network. And that's what I had in mind. And neither of those are true. Actually, it does work in all environments, and it doesn't crush the network. And I want to show you why and how that's even possible. So
So
let me,
there's a question. So for the example where Dropbox is automatically uninstalled,
Mhm.
is audit logging maintained?
Yeah, so here's the thing, and that's a great question, Fern. What I would say is that we are just running a script at the endpoint, right? And so I love those types of questions, like, can you do this and can you do that, and what does it look like overall? What somebody finally said to me that got me to really wrap my head around what was possible with Tanium is that anything you could do either at the command prompt or armed with a PowerShell script or a VB script or a Python script or a shell script, then Tanium can do for you synchronously across all of your machines very quickly and at massive scale. So what that boils down to then, as it relates to your question, is that whatever is normally going to happen at that endpoint is still going to happen. Right? We're just running a little uninstall script at that endpoint. So if there's audit logging configured there, then certainly it will be logged. Uh, and we can take that a step further to ensure audit logging is enabled, and it's enabled everywhere in the environment. So I believe the answer is yes, really, when it boils down to it. Uh, But again, it's whatever is configured at the endpoint. And Tanium is about making sure that there is standardization amongst the endpoints. So let me jump over to the architecture and show you how we make this possible. So it is the architecture of Tanium that allows us to go get real-time information like we do and to scale in the way that we do. This architecture I'm showing here, this topology, is not Tanium. This is actually how every other agent-based tool since the beginning of time has operated. And like Ryan said in his introduction, Tanium came about by two gentlemen who first created a tool called BigFix, which you may be familiar with. They ended up selling that off to IBM, but when they did that, they said, BigFix was good for 15 or 20 years ago using this model, but how could we have made that better? Because it just doesn't scale well, nor do any other tools that operate in this, hub and spoke topology, which again is all of them. It's everything before Tanium, where they have this central server, and then there's a lot of relay servers or distribution points, and then ultimately those talk out to the endpoint. But quite honestly, like I said, that's what Tanium set out to solve, because there's a lot of WAN traffic associated with this, and there's a lot of infrastructure needed just to run this. And in order to scale it, you need more and more relay servers, each of which has a cost, each of which has an administrative overhead and a security risk. And so I won't belabor the point, but that's what Tanium set out to solve. And we did so by getting rid of the relay servers. We actually spent about 5 years in development from 2007 to 2012, just coming up with how do we make that better. And what we ended up with was this being the way that Tanium does endpoint configuration, or Tanium does endpoint communication. And this is the secret sauce of Tanium. This is our differentiator versus everything else. And I'll explain how this works. Essentially, this chain of machines, we call it the linear chain, but that's a single subnet. Uh, and when I'm asking the question of get computer name from all machines, I'm not having to ask it of every machine individually, as would have been the case up here, right? If you were to try to do that same question with a Desktop Central or a Big Fix or an SCCM, they would have to ask every machine individually, which would crush the network. That's a ton of connections, which is why they don't. That's why they have to pull it from that central database. But with Tanium, I'm not asking it one time per computer. I'm asking it one time per subnet, which should be a much smaller number. So basically, I'm going to say, hey, what's your computer name? And then that question is passed along out here at the LAN. What's your computer name? What's your computer name? What's your computer name? Until the aggregate answers come back to Tanium. But it's all happening out here at the LAN. It's happening at the layer 2 where there's lots of bandwidth and things happen quickly. And if you think about this in terms of pushing a patch, it becomes even more pronounced with those efficiency gains because we're going to push that patch one time and then they are actually going to share it amongst themselves. And so in essence, we've created a distributed cache of all of the packages. It means now if another machine comes online and says, hey, I need patch number 12, it's not going to have to reach back to that central server. It's just going to reconstitute it from its machines, from its buddies out here on the LAN. Again, where things happen very quickly. So that's the magic. That's the magic that is Tanium versus other things. In addition to the fact that it's a single platform to do all of these functions, right? And so if you think about the efficiency gained by that architecture, the visibility gained by being able to go get real-time data from all of your endpoints, and then the ability to then pile on different functionality and reduce complexity in the environment by way of going towards that single platform, that's the Tanium vision. That's what we're looking to do there. And I will say, even though Tanium can replace all of these things, even though there is an opportunity, of course, to replace tools, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing out of the gate, right? Typically, we'll find something that we can solve for. Let's say it's a visibility gap. Maybe we're going to go find how many machines you have, right? Because oftentimes we'll ask organizations, how many machines do you have? And they don't know. It's not uncommon. Not only do they not know, but they'll give us answers that vary widely. They'll tell us, we have somewhere between 5 and 6,000, or even on the bigger scale. I mean, we have somewhere between 100 and 120,000 machines. But that's a major delta of machines that might be going unpatched. They might not have your security protocols there. And so step one for Tanium is let's go find those things. Right? And so that might be our initial use case. But then as other renewals come up, as other teams get involved, we can then plug these other things in. And it's not new infrastructure to deploy. It's not new training that your team has to go do. It's just a licensing exercise. It's just Tanium taking over that particular function. And so I want to cover a couple of these with you today, just to talk about what that might look like in your environment. What does it look like to go find what all is out there? So I'll start with what we call Discover. And Discover is our ability to go find all of the machines that are missing the Tanium agent. And where this becomes useful is that almost without fail, there's some machines that have fallen outside of your administrative control in one way or another. Like if you were to become a customer of Tanium tomorrow, we would say use whatever your incumbent software distribution mechanism is to deploy the Tanium agent. So let's call that SCCM for the sake of conversation. So you use SCCM, you build a package, you push it out to all of your machines. It takes a little while, but maybe after 3 or 4 days, you come back and you say, all right, SCCM has the agent on everything. Well, when we go in and look with that discovery mechanism that I'm about to describe here, I can almost guarantee you that we will find that you will have gotten that agent on 80 to 85% of your machines. And that means that there was 15 to 20% of them that were going unmanaged, that had, again, maybe fallen outside of your administrative control in one way or another. And it can happen for any number of reasons, right? It could be maybe the SCCM agent was broken. Maybe WMI was broken on that machine, or the disk was filled up, or it wasn't domain joined, or somebody used an image that wasn't your standard image. Any number of things, but it happens, and it happens time and time again. And it's just very difficult to know where you've missed, where those things have, again, kind of fallen through the cracks. So the way that Tanium's going to find those is very uniquely Tanium. And I'm going to flip over to the architecture to describe this because it is this architecture as well that really lends itself to doing discovery, because we can make those 80 to 85% of the machines where you got the agent, we can turn those into little mini scanners at the subnet. So like if that one's .10 and that one's .15, we just have .10 scan 11, 12, 13, 14, and figure out what's there. It's just scanning the white space between known hosts, but we are going to find all sorts of stuff. We're going to find the printers and the IP phones and the IP cameras and routers and switches and even all of these things that can't accommodate a Tanium agent, but we still want to know that they're there. So we can start to develop that inventory. But we're also going to find a lot of machines that should have been getting managed and that we can manage. And then we're going to put an agent there and we're going to shore up that blind spot. And so that's really step one, go scan the white space. The other thing is I keep talking about agent health problems. Every tool has agent health problems to various degrees. And truth be told, Tanium's not immune to that, right? There's some environmental things like a disk filling up that's going to cause issues with the agent. Uh, the way that Tanium overcomes that, where other tools just can't, is that in addition to scanning white space, we're going to turn those agents into little neighborhood watch of sorts, right? Where they're going to tell on each other. Like the .10 in that same scenario can say, hey, I still see the MAC address of .15. That device is definitely still there, still on the network, but no longer answering my questions. And so somebody needs to check that out. And you can either get that as a real-time alert or even just like a daily roll-up. Here's the machines that stopped checking in. And that's hugely beneficial, but it's that two-pronged approach of scan the white space, play neighborhood watch, that allows us to get very comprehensive coverage of that agent, which of course, in turn, makes all of these other things better, right? Like, of
So,
course, yeah.
so Eric, you talked about the infrastructure. Does this solution only on-prem, or are there other ways to deploy it? Just so I know.
Yeah, great question. So I represented this as what looks like an on-prem solution. This very well could be a hosted solution. Tanium can host this with what we call TAS, or Tanium as a service. It's just a SaaS solution, which means no infrastructure for you to manage. All you have to do then is deploy the agent, and they just start checking in, and this all just kind of works. But even on-prem, it's very minimal infrastructure, which is one of the biggest draws of Tanium versus other tools, is that it really could be one server like what we're seeing here. Most organizations will build out a second one for high availability, and we throw in what we call a module server, but that's 3 to 4 servers. We build a zone server. 4 servers at most, as compared to what you likely have today for distribution points or relay servers in your other tools. And as we talked about, the more of those tools we can consolidate, the less infrastructure there is for you to manage, because Tanium will start taking over those functionalities. I appreciate that, Ryan. Good call out. So we're just telling the Tanium story here. We've now found everything, right? And this is a big part of going towards getting that towards that IT hygiene, right? Making sure that we have everything accounted for. Now we probably want to track it, right? Let's just see what that looks like, where Tanium can then be really a standalone asset management database for you, and can keep a listing of everything that has checked in here. And these reports are super easy to create, to the point that when I was a Tanium customer, I had some of my non-technical counterparts in areas like procurement that would always be asking me for reports like, hey, Eric, can you get me a list of all of our laptops and their serial number? Like, yeah, let me go get that for you. And then, maybe can you show us all of our installs of Visio and tell me if they haven't been installed or haven't been used in 60 days? Yeah, let me get that report for you. But eventually I just gave them access in here, because these reports are really easy to create. I mean, you don't have to be a SQL query master to come in and generate a report where you can just go, okay, well, I know I want the computer name, right? I know I want maybe a serial number, right? Maybe I want the operating system. Again, you just kind of pick out the things that you want in a report. Maybe a chassis type or something like that would be a good one, right? And so once we hit the submit button, it just generates a report that has all of that data for all of the machines that have checked into Tanium. And this can be exported out to an email. It can be exported out to some other system like a Splunk, or more importantly, it can be exported to an ITSM tool like a ServiceNow, like a Flexera, like a Salesforce. And that really increases the value here, because we are in turn increasing the value of that other tool. Because as you know, tools like ServiceNow are great. We love ServiceNow. They're a great partner. Where it becomes very difficult to manage ServiceNow is in the upkeep of the CIs. That endpoint data is very difficult to keep updated in those ITSM tools, and Tanium does that part exceedingly well. We are very much that high fidelity data, the reliable data that's coming off of endpoints, and being able to ship that into those other systems. Uh, just as an overall, I mean, Tanium really becomes a record of truth in this way. So now we found everything, we kept record of it. Uh, this really can diverge in a couple of different directions here in this part of a Tanium demo. Because we do so many different things, right? There's the purely security play, and this is where you might have an incident responder or your SOC, and it'd be modules like threat response, where we're doing forensics, we're doing incident response, things like that. We can also talk the purely operations play. This is the patching, the software distribution, asset management. And then there's kind of a in-between road. There's the one that I think really bridges the gap between that operations team and that security team, and that's the compliance piece. It's vulnerability management, things like that. And so I just want to dig into a couple of these today. I will say I'm going to largely lean towards that operations side of things because as a former security practitioner, I will tell you, threat response is probably my favorite module. That's the one that is most fun for me to go in there and see all of the indicators of compromise and the alerts of things. But I happen to know our operations counterparts will lose interest in that part of it, whereas security folks have a vested interest in making sure the patching is being done well. So I think it's worthwhile that we go there. If anybody has their interest piqued by any of this, I would love to come talk to you about threat response. And so let's actually start in that middle road, that road that bridges the gap. And we'll talk about vulnerability management and endpoint compliance. And again, being able to do this on the same platform that will be doing the patching as well is really beneficial. Like personally, when I was running a security team, I used another product. And I'll just tell you that the other product was Qualys. And my team was doing patching in BigFix. And so typically it would go something like, hey, Qualys says you didn't patch your thing. And they'd go, well, BigFix says we did. Right. And there was some contention there. It was some headbutting after that. And so once we brought in Tanium to really do both, right? I could let them see my vulnerability findings. I could go look at their patching efforts. It made those calls a little more harmonious. But we'll jump into one of the reports here and just take a look at what that might look like. And quite honestly, it looks like what you would expect from a vulnerability management tool. It's going to show you a listing of what all vulnerabilities were found. And like, for instance, I ran my entire vulnerability management program from this screen here, where it's bubbling up the machines that are most vulnerable in the environment. In this case, it looks like we only scanned 5, but this very well could be 5,000. And the thought process for me, at least, was if the patching should be automated, and the patching should be automated, right? If a machine bubbles up to this list, then clearly the patching automation is not working. And so it was then became the day job of the operations team to figure out why those things weren't patching. And little by little, we knocked off those issues and we actually got compliant with our own patching policy. Glorious day. Uh, and the other part here is just to really highlight that platform approach and the value of consolidating on a single platform is that we can dig into any of these vulnerabilities and get additional information about them. But more importantly, we can straight from this vulnerability management report, click a little button that says remediate and patch. And when we do so, it's going to launch into our patch module where now the operations team is about 3 button clicks away from getting this particular patch deployed to all of the systems that need it. You think about that. I mean, that's something where typically, again, that report gets handed off between teams. The operations team looks at it and goes, what do you want me to do with this, right? It's just a list of the CVEs, and then they have to go make a correlation to the KB article that's actually going to fix that problem. And what we've just highlighted here is the ability to really pivot between the two. And quite honestly, most teams aren't going to go patch this one patch on the systems that need it. I'd consider that like sniper patching, right? But if the need came up, if there was a 0-day thing that you absolutely had to get this out there on all of the machines and have the visibility to know that it got applied and that it worked, there's no better way than being able to just click this install button. And you'll notice there's also an uninstall button, which also works very well and has gives you the visibility to know that it actually worked or didn't. Uh, and to know that in real time is allowing organizations to really shrink their patching windows down, because there's less of a need for these long, drawn out patch testing cycles where most organizations are patching at least 30 days behind. We're allowing them to shrink that down to a week or 2 weeks uh, at most. So it's just a really big deal. And quite honestly, just talking patch as a whole, we're able to get the patch efficacy of your endpoints to a 99+% efficacy. And every time I say that to a group of systems admins, they all kind of look at me side-eyed and they're like, there's no way, right? We have machines that won't take a patch. We have machines that have endpoint issues. The disk is filled up, whatever the case may be. But there is a process to get to that 99+%. And it's a real 99+%. And take a quick break. I see there is a question. Can all magical remediation actions being described be scheduled to occur off hours? Yeah, Kevin, that's a great question. And that everything that Tanium does can be scheduled. Everything can either be scheduled to happen at a particular time. It can be scheduled to recur on a regular basis. It can even have maintenance windows tied to it. And then for things like patching, especially, there's the ability to have a workflow associated with that, have a pop-up to the user that says, hey, we've applied patches and we need to reboot. Can we do that now or can we do it later? But the way that we get to that 99+% is through a series of things, really. The first of which is that we do that discovery that I described, right? We go find all of the machines, because normally if I ask a group of people, like, what's your patching efficacy look like? And what I'm asking them is, it's the day before Patch Tuesday, right? It's the end of the month, and I'm asking, what percentage of patches have you gotten out there effectively? And almost without fail, they tell me, it's somewhere between 90 and 95%. And while I believe that's what their tool is telling them, it turns out that it's 90 to 95% of the 80% of the machines they knew about. And the actual patch efficacy ends up being much, much lower, because those machines that they weren't reporting on were usually the worst of the bunch. And so, again, step one for Tanium, go find everything that's out there. And it's not just specific to patching. I mean, it's not just specific to Tanium. That's basic IT hygiene. It's so fundamental to everything else, is just knowing what you have. And then step two is that we do patch applicability scanning considerably different than other tools, in that we take the entire Microsoft offline cab file and we pass that to the endpoint. Because we're so fast and efficient at talking to endpoints, we take this offline cab file, push it to the endpoint, and say, scan yourself against this. If you're unfamiliar with that Windows cab file, what that is it's a comprehensive listing of every security update that Microsoft has ever put out for any of their products. It's the file you would use if you had a machine that didn't have internet connectivity. It was a completely air-gapped machine. You pass that to the endpoint and say, tell me what you need out of this list. And it still uses the Windows Update agent to do so. It's just looking against this comprehensive list. And so by doing that, Tanium goes and finds things that other tools just miss. Almost always we'll find patches that go back 2014 or earlier in an environment, even when they think that they're patching 90 to 95% or higher. And so third thing then is that we use that very efficient delivery mechanism in the Tanium architecture to get the patch out there. And then finally, we are going to actually surface any errors that happen at the endpoint. That's a major difference versus other tools, and it allows us to get to that 99+%. And you're noticing probably here that there's a lot of very good reporting in Tanium, and it's no different in other parts where we're talking about patching specific metrics. We can even go in there and see what is the current state of patching. Like, this is a good one here, this pie chart that's showing basically how many machines have patches that are older than 30 days. And so we can look at this as a pie chart, even better as a histograph probably, where we can then see what it looks like for you over the last 30 days or whichever time frame. Normally when we go in there and start looking with a prospect or a new customer, it's more like 50% red or 60% red. Without fail, we'll watch this drop towards 0 when you let Tanium take a pass at this. So I will also mention it's not just OS patching. We can do the same thing for the third-party stuff as well, right? Which typically is much more difficult because there's so many of these things out there, and there's a lot of non-standardization. So with Tanium, we can largely automate the third-party patching as well. All right, so given that we're coming up on time and I want to make sure we leave some time for questions at the end, let me just start to wrap here. And I just want to kind of tie a bow on this, where we started in talking about Tanium in a platform approach. And that is that, again, Tanium can do both operations and security use cases on a single platform. And the benefits of that single platform are all of the things we've talked about, right? Reduction in complexity, being able to consolidate tools, reduce cost, reduce training needs, and really, again, just build a bridge between teams, break down those silos in a way that makes it all easier, which again lends itself to visibility. So I'm going to stop there. If there's any additional questions that I can answer, I'd love to do that. I'm not sure if you have the ability to come off mute to ask them or if it has to be in chat, but please ask any questions that you might have. And we can break them. Okay, so Fern, I see the question, what is the typical size or range of your customer base, number of endpoints? So for a long time, we didn't even talk to customers unless they had at least 5,000 endpoints, but that's no longer the case. We're going down market, and really any endpoint count is worthwhile. And we'd love to talk to you about how Tanium can help on any number of them. I don't know what the average number is. I don't know what the typical number is. Like I said, we have customers that are literally 1 million endpoints, and we have customers that are 1,000 endpoints. So somewhere in between those, I'd say at least of the customers that I've personally supported, I think the average is probably 20 to 25,000. But again, there's a lot that are smaller and bigger. Yeah, the real draw of Tanium is in our ability to scale massively and to continue to have this same level of visibility, whether it's 500,000 or 5,000, right? And so we actually started with some of the biggest organizations in the world when we first started delivering Tanium. But since then, we've expanded and have moved down range or down market as well. See a question from John. What does the boards link do? Boards, maybe oh, so not click that one, but I imagine it goes into our trends. So trends is our ability to then plot or graph everything that Tanium can go get, and this could be really anything. Like I like looking at the patching metrics in here, but also things like operations metrics. How many machines have an uptime of longer than a certain amount of days, or there's all sorts of different things that we can look at in here. Friends is a great part of this to really get metrics on just about anything that you could possibly want to know about your endpoints. Anybody else? Any other questions about Tanium? Anything in general that we can like to discuss? All right, that I will stop sharing. And Ryan, I don't know if you had something some closing comments or anything.
No, that was good. And as I mentioned before, I'll put our emails in the chat so that if anybody has any questions outside of the session, feel free to reach out to us. So I put it into the chat right now. And we really appreciate everybody's time today, and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, everyone.